Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. And today we're going to be hopping right back into our series where we are predicting every single Power 4 team's record by the start of the college football season. So make sure to like and subscribe so you can come back for all of our future videos. Today we're going to be looking at the Miami Hurricanes. They came in at number 22 in the Rank and File preseason poll. And I think Miami has a good chance this year to potentially get back to their winning ways. They're spending a lot of money in NIL, but I don't think that has everything to do with their potential comeback. And I do think they might have a chance to compete for an ACC title this year. So it is very exciting to be a Miami fan this year. They might be coming back to relevance. Now, the start to the season is a little bit tricky with a road trip to Florida. I think that game could end up being a loss for Miami. It's going to be really tough to start the year with a Power 4 team, especially on the road in the swamp. This is kind of a rivalry matchup. There's a lot of things that just really don't favor Miami here. I think Miami's probably the more talented team. That might be really all they have going their way here, though. Definitely one to watch in week one. Going to be a good game for sure. Florida A&M, Ball State, and USF, those all should be pretty easy games, finishing out the non-conference slate. Not worried about any of those really. I do think that worst case scenario, Miami's heading into that Virginia Tech game 3-1. The Virginia Tech game, though, on a Friday night, this one could be kind of interesting. There's a lot of people who are high on Virginia Tech this year. I think they'll be all right, but I'm not. I'm not completely sold on them winning a road game at Miami just yet. Road trip to Cal is going to be a very long flight. Luckily, they did play on Friday night the last week, so that'll help probably just a little bit. And they do have a bye week afterwards. So definitely, the schedule favors the timing of this matchup, but it'll still be kind of tricky to go on the road that far away. Miami's definitely a more talented team, but still one to watch out for just because of the distance traveled there. After the bye week, they have two pretty tricky games with a road trip to Louisville, who won't be probably quite as good as they were last year. They did make the ACC championship last year. Probably not going to happen again. But I do still think Louisville's one of the better teams in the ACC. A road matchup, it's definitely something to watch out for there as a potential loss. Home against Florida State, I think this is going to be a really good game. Florida State's probably going to be ranked higher at this point, but going on the road to play Miami can't be easy for them. So this is going to be another really good game. Home against Duke. Duke, they lost Riley Leonard to the transfer portal. And I think just overall, they're not going to be quite the same team that they were last year, upsetting Clemson and Notre Dame. Especially at home for Miami, I do like the Hurricanes here. A road trip to Georgia Tech. We don't want to talk about what happened last year. Hopefully, they learned their lesson, and we'll just move on from that. Um, the home game against Wake Forest and Syracuse to end the year shouldn't be too much of an issue, I don't think. So I do like Miami in both of those games. I think they will be favored there. They have a total of 8 home games and 4 away games, so definitely a home heavy schedule, which helps. They also only play 2 opponents ranked in the rank and file top 25, which are Louisville and Florida State. So they are back to back, but overall only a schedule difficulty of 3.5 out of 10.
Looking here at the guaranteed wins for the Miami Hurricanes going into 2024, we have 3 of them. We start off with Florida A&M. This one's pretty self-explanatory. This is an FCS opponent going up against Miami, who has terrific athletes, maybe not necessarily the athletes of an Ohio State or a Georgia, but terrific athletes in their own right. This is going to be probably 30 to 40 point win for the Canes. With Ball State, same concept. Ball State is an FBS team. They are in the MAC, so better competition, but still competition that shouldn't be able to keep up with Miami for very long at all. As far as South Florida is concerned, again, this team is better than Ball State, but this is not great competition for Miami. Let me just state the obvious. Uh, so we expect these 3 games to be easy wins for the Canes. Looking at the likely wins for these Hurricanes going into 2024, we have 6 of them. We have Virginia Tech, Cal, Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. Virginia Tech's going to be much improved than they have been over the past few seasons, but it's not going to be enough to beat Miami. Miami brings in the best transfer quarterback in our eyes in Cam Ward to a team that is on the rise. They had a couple embarrassing moments last season, one of them being the infamous fumble against Georgia Tech that ended up costing them the game. They could have just kneeled the ball and ran out the clock. They didn't. The rest is history. But we got to give Miami the advantage over Virginia Tech because of the quarterback and because of the returning experience they have. As far as Cal, Duke, and Wake Forest, these are always teams that can play spoiler, but we don't think they will against Miami. Cal is going to struggle to make a bowl. Duke is going to be worse off than they have been the past few seasons because their coach Mike Elko is now at Texas A&M and their quarterback Riley Leonard is now at Notre Dame. Losing that sort of talent as well as their coaching staff is going to make for an uphill battle to beat one of the better teams in the ACC in Miami. And Wake Forest's quarterback Sam Hartman has been gone for now 2 seasons, their second season, which is going to keep the snowball effect on Wake Forest going as far as making their team worse. Georgia Tech and Syracuse are up-and-coming teams in the ACC. Georgia Tech especially, they had a solid season last year, but we don't expect them to be able to compete with Miami again. We think Miami's in the upper echelon of the ACC. And as far as Syracuse goes, this is going to be a team that's improved. They're bringing in quarterback Kyle McCord from Ohio State. He did get his fair share of criticism from Buckeye fans last year, but he was a decent quarterback there in his own right. So we expect Syracuse to be improved. They've had their moments over the years, so maybe up and coming isn't a completely fair label because they've been competitive in the ACC for quite some time, most years. But regardless of what label you want to put on the Orange, we don't think they're going to be good enough to beat Miami this year. And finally, we have the toss-ups for this team. We have 3 of them. We have Florida, Louisville, and Florida State. A lot of people are going to be picking Miami to beat Florida week 1 because Florida simply isn't very good. But I think a lot of these people are forgetting that the Swamp is still the Swamp. It's a tough place to play. Cam Ward may be a great quarterback, but he hasn't yet played a game in the Miami system. So I think Florida inherently has an advantage there because Graham Mertz is experienced. He may not be as good as Cam Ward, but he's experienced, and experience does matter in college football, especially when Florida has home field advantage. So we're actually going to pick Florida in this game. We think Miami's a better team, but because of the fact that it's early in the season and it's a hostile environment, I think the Canes are going to struggle with that one. As far as Louisville goes, kind of the same logic we have with that one. Obviously, Louisville's stadium wouldn't be on most people's list of hostile environments. But this is a Louisville team that played for the ACC Championship last season, and they competed very well with Florida State. A great defensive battle between these two teams. So we got to give Louisville the advantage against Miami, even though we think they're going to take a step back, out of respect for what Coach Jeff Brom has accomplished there in his short tenure. As far as Florida State goes, a lot of people are going to be picking the Noles to win this game because Florida State's fresh off an undefeated regular season that saw them winning the ACC title. We actually have the Canes winning this one. We think Florida State's going to be a great team, more than likely an ACC contender, but we think that because the game's in Miami and Florida State's not going to be quite as good as last year's team in our eyes, We got to give Miami the win with this one. But again, all these games are going to be very close. They really could go either way. But we have Florida beating the Canes as well as Louisville, and we have the Canes beating Florida State.
Taking a look at the schedule recap, I do think that Miami loses to Florida to start the year. It is a road trip. It's a non-conference game at an SEC opponent, and that's just going to be really difficult, especially with all the hype surrounding Miami this year. I think that's probably something that they might trip up on to start the season, overlooking an SEC team that a lot of people aren't expecting to do a whole lot, especially because of their schedule. I think this is one that Miami might overlook and get caught with an early season loss. However, the next few games shouldn't be much of an issue. With Florida A&M, Ball State, and USF, we have all three of those as guaranteed wins. Virginia Tech at home could be interesting. There's a lot of people high on Virginia Tech this year. I still think Miami's a little bit better, and I do think that they'll be able to win at home. At Cal, it's a long road trip, so that's definitely one to watch out for. But once again, Miami is just better. After the bye week, though, they do have two difficult games back to back, a road trip to Louisville and a home game against Florida State. I've got to give it to the home team in both of these. I think that Miami is going to be slight underdogs at Louisville, and I'm going to go ahead and take Louisville there. And then at home against Florida State, I think Florida State's a good team, but they're not quite as good as they were last year. They lost a lot of players from that team, and going at Miami, team, like I said, with a lot of hype around them, I do think they'll be able to win one of these big games this year. So I've got them beating Florida State. Home against Duke also shouldn't be a huge problem. Pretty likely win here for Miami. Duke lost Riley Leonard in the transfer portal, and I don't think they're going to be quite as big as they were last year, pulling off a few major upsets. Road trip to Georgia Tech shouldn't be much of an issue. Like I mentioned earlier, don't really want to talk about what happened last time. Hopefully this year Miami learns to take a knee. And closing out the season after the bye week, Wake Forest and Syracuse, both home games. Not overly worried about either of those for Miami. So this puts their record at 10-2, and their projected record actually sits at 9-3. So it favors losing one more game in here. If I had to pick, I'd probably say it'd be Virginia Tech or Florida State, even though they're both at home. Both of those are definitely losable games for Miami. FPI has their record at 8.2 and 3.8, so a little bit lower than us. They're favoring more towards 4 losses. And then they have a 9% chance to make the playoffs and a 0.6% chance to win the national championship. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.